Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. I'm your host Rick the Barkeep, bringing you podcast 102 here at the Tavern, presented by Hirotaku.com. And first, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everybody out there. I'm glad you're able to join me here on Christmas Day for the special podcast that I have. And the reason that I'm broadcasting here on Christmas Day is actually in response to another video. Yes, like the previous video, Linkara is doing his history of Power Rangers. Today he came out with his 3-part segment on Power Rangers Jungle Fury, and just as I did with Operation Overdrive, I want to go ahead and cover not only his response to Jungle Fury and what his thoughts are of it, but I want to go ahead and counter with my overall thoughts on Jungle Fury and just kind of a little bit of a rundown of the series. So the first thing I would suggest you guys do is go take a look at Linkara's History of Power Rangers. You can find it at topthefourthwall.com, or I will go ahead and have it in the comments section, and you can go ahead and check it out there. So go ahead and watch that first, and then come on back to this. Now, I'm assuming you've probably already watched it at this point, so let's get into the series. Now, the thing that Linkara brings up about Jungle Fury is that it's a series that's not really talked about. And, I'm going to have to agree with him on that. When you talk to people about their favorite Power Ranger series or their worst Power Ranger series, Jungle Fury, for whatever reason, is one that just doesn't get talked about that often. Now, in my viewpoint, I think the reason that is because it's kind of bland. I mean, overall, there are some good elements to it. There's some good stuff, some bad stuff, a lot of weird stuff to it. But I think in the entire context of the 20 years of Power Rangers, it's just kind of there. I will agree with him that it does have some improvements on a lot of the technical aspects that Operation Overdrive was lacking, and that it was overall better. I don't know too much about that. Again, I really liked Operation Overdrive, which I know is contrary to popular belief, but Jungle Fury was just kind of meh for me. It really wasn't something that stuck out to me. It wasn't something that was like terribly horrible or terribly good. But I think the issues that I have with Jungle Fury is completely different than what Linkara has. Linkara's issues with the series are resolution of storylines that go a little too quickly, things within that direction, some goofy things that are kind of brought over from Gekiranger, but he has a lot of praise for this particular season. He points out that not enough people really talk about it, and to be honest, he goes in a lot more depth with the characters than I had really ever gone into before. I mean, he talks a lot about Casey's character, and he brings up a lot of things that I did not really consider when doing my top 5 worst Red Rangers, which, if you can recall, before it was deleted from YouTube, Casey was on my top 5 worst. I just didn't like him. Now, Linkara has not swayed me in that direction. I still don't like him. I think he is one of the worst Red Rangers out there. But I think his evaluation does show that there was a little bit more thought that went into his character than what people may have thought, or at least more than I have thought. And I do appreciate that, because the one thing Linkara does is he does bring up things that I'd never thought about before, because he is analyzing it episode by episode, and he comes from it from a perspective of not actually having known anything about the show or actually watching it prior. Not to mention, he comes in with no preconceived notions. I would have to say, when I came into Jungle Fury, I'm like, okay, Operation Overdrive got better. Again, that was my opinion. And let's see it get better. And I didn't really feel that it was getting better at that time. Not to mention, one of the issues I had was I had seen Gekiranger first. And then I saw Jungle Fury. And that's going to be a discussion for kind of another time about comparing Power Rangers with Sentai, which is always the elephant in the room with any season. But I want to go into with you guys today about what I perceive to be the 2 big issues with Jungle Fury that Linkara doesn't really cover in his video because of the nature in which he's reviewing it. Now, the 2 issues that I always had with Jungle Fury was bad characters and, coincidentally, bad acting along with that, which is something that Linkara praises, but I'll go into a little bit more detail on that here in just a second. And the other is the comparison with Gekiranger, where I'm just going to say Gekiranger is better. And again, we'll get into that here in a second. Now, I'm going to do a separate podcast, again, about comparing Power Rangers to Super Sentai. But I want you guys to understand that when I came into this show, I had seen Gekiranger before. And what my hope was, and this is really true of any Power Rangers series at this point, and again, we'll talk more about that later, is that you have the opportunity to see the Japanese series, see what they did right, see what they did wrong, and improve upon what you had before. And I don't believe that Jungle Fury did that in a number of cases while it was still trying to be unique in its own right. But before we get into that, let's talk about the characters, because the characters was the problem I had with the season, that I watched every episode. I had the DVR, so I watched every time it came on, but I just wasn't engaged with the personalities that we had. Linkara points out that there are no bad actors in the series, but the actors that played the three main Rangers, Casey, Theo, and Lily, they got grading really, really quick. And I would say the worst offender of them all was the girl that played Lily, and her name escapes me at the moment, but and I should have looked that up, but Lily, she's annoying. She is described as the heart of the team. She is the most positive of the team, and she's the most happy-go-lucky. And I get that, but man, does it come on way too strong. She looks like a rejected cheerleader, if anything. She just comes in, she's bubbly, way beyond what is called for. And there's nothing wrong with having a cheerleader type on your show. I mean, we had Kimberly, but Kimberly was tolerable, despite the fact she was a literal cheerleader. But this girl, she's just too bright to where it's almost like you get diabetes just from watching her in a way. And that's the kind of thing that bothered me about her. She was too perky. She was too bright, too happy. That a lot of these serious issues didn't sink in as much as they should have. Now, am I saying that she should have changed to become a darker character? No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that she was just too happy for her own good, and I think to the detriment of the character in the series, because I just did not like the character of Lily at all. The next character I did not like was Theo, because he has this arrogant cockiness about him, but because of the stature of the actor, by which I mean he is short, he comes off as somebody who is too overconfident with himself and always gets knocked down a peg. And I'm not saying that's the character of Theo. That is that is what I got from this character. That is what I got by watching him in the series. That, yes, he is the most skilled. He has the most knowledge of the three primary Rangers, but he's just... Again, it's like... what's the best way? Okay, like... I hate to use Star Trek references, but again, Star Trek is always big with me. If I didn't like Power Rangers, I'd probably be more into Star Trek. But there's an episode where Nog stands up to General Martok. And the thing is that Nog has no authority. He's a Ferengi standing to a Klingon general and so forth. And he kind of gets knocked down the peg a couple of times when he does that, and he ultimately stands up to him at the end of the episode. But that's what I see with Theo, is that somebody of lower stature trying to stand up to somebody in higher authority and failing to do that. And again, it's not the actor's fault that he's short. It's just, it throws me off when he grows 2 feet when he morphs, and it's not necessarily like a Justin thing, but just his body language in that and how he interacts with other people. I just don't get that sense of the character that they wrote. The character that they wrote and the actor that they cast did not mesh. Is what I'm getting at, basically. I could never take Theo seriously in any situation. And again, I just didn't like him because there was such a disconnect between what was written, what was being shown, and even the Blue Ranger himself. The weird thing is that you have to imagine the character outside of the suit. And when I do that with Theo, And I imagine him as the Blue Ranger, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't fit for me. I don't see them as being one and the same. Tommy is the White Ranger, Tommy is the Green Ranger. I see those guys as being one and the same. I can believe that this guy is the White Ranger, despite what the Sentai footage may throw at us a couple of times. Nevertheless, Theo just did not work for me on those levels. And I've talked about Casey before. I just think he was too young, too naive, not very interesting. And I think, Jason Smith as the actor, I'm sure he's gotten better as an actor, but at that point in his career, I just didn't fully believe him in his convictions as the Red Ranger character. Now again, I've learned some new stuff about him by listening to somebody else's commentary, because the thing is, people will talk about Rangers, but Linkara does a great job of just pointing out all these different character arcs that even I really didn't think about and may have gone over my head, but he had the advantage of, again, going into the series with any preconceived notions, and he had the ability to sit down and watch every single episode and analyze them, which is something I have not done, which obviously I need to improve upon for future podcasts and specials and anything else I'm going to go ahead and do. But the thing about the characters that I did like, I liked RJ a lot. I thought he was great mentor. I agree with everything Linkara says in his video. I like Dom. A lot of people don't like him. They call him, the Doogie Howser Power Ranger, as if that's an insult. I thought Doogie Howser was a good character, or at least, I've never seen the show, but I've never heard somebody be called Doogie Howser as an insult. But I like those guys. They were great. Hated Fran, couldn't stand her, and to be honest, I barely remembered she was in the show until we had to go back and look at these episodes with Linkara, and I'm just like, I get what you're saying about her positive traits, but man, she was just dead weight throughout the season. So I didn't like her at all. She was played up too much. I did not like the characters of Daishi and Camille. They did not work for me as well, and I'll get into that when we talk about the Gekiranger aspect of it. But I really loved the Jungle Masters. Fant, Rilla, Swoop, I can't remember, Lope. Every Jungle Master that we had in the series, Master Mao, which nobody's really said it, but does anybody else think that Master Mao is a play on Chairman Mao? Because I get the name, because they're all supposed to be based on animals, so Mao is a cat, so Meow, Mao, I get that. But since we also have this influx of Chinese astrology and culture into the show, and his name is Mao, Master Mao, Chairman Mao from China, did anybody else pick that up? I thought that was pretty epic, because when I was like, oh no, they're making a Chairman Mao joke. But again, I thought that was brilliant. I loved all the Jungle Masters, and the thing is, I would have liked the show to have been about them. Because you got older actors who are more skilled in their craft, and I think have more interesting stories. Look at the three masters that we get in the spirit realm. They're from 10,000 years ago, I believe, was the time frame. They are dead, and they exist to help the Rangers in the series gain their Jungle Master modes, and of course their new Megazords. Why couldn't the show be about them? Because I think they, as characters, are far more interesting. Or take a look at the modern day masters. Master Fan, he's a reclusive old man that lives in a cabin in the woods. You have Master Swoop, who is blind and yet is a powerful warrior. And you got Master Fan, who is the father of RJ, and he's just a strict disciplinarian. These guys are better suited to be main characters than to be side characters. And I think that's where I have my issue with the characters and the actors. The guest stars, the supporting roles, are far more interesting and their actors are far more better than the three main characters we're supposed to be invested on and focus in. And yes, they are younger actors and probably starting out at the beginning of their career, but the other guys were so much better. I had more fun with them. I want to know more about Master Fan, Master Swoop. Was he blind his entire life? Was he blinded as a child? How did he have to go through these struggles of being blind and become a Pashui master? How all did that happen? Or Master Rilla. We got Master Rilla that's in the spirit world. First of all, how did he die? Was it a noble sacrifice? Was it a meaningless death? How was he? How did he fight Dai Shi and fight in the Beast Wars from long ago? Let's know more about him. And the only other female hero character that we have, Master Gwen, I believe, who of course was Kat from SPD. Why is she the only female that we really see? It's her and Lilia, the only Poshway females that we really see, other than a couple of background characters in the first episode. Why is she not a character that we know more about? There's just all these questions that we have for these characters, and we have great actors portraying them. Why are we not focusing on them? Heck, the guy that played Master Mao, he was in Lord of the Rings as one of the Uruk-hai. He was in The Matrix, the bad ones, yes, but he played a great character. He's an accomplished actor in New Zealand and in the United States. So why didn't we get more of him in the series? I just don't understand why we had to focus on the less interesting characters. And I know the issue that was given with Mystic Force, that Linkara pointed out, and a couple of other people, is that you focus on the secondary characters more than the Rangers. And the thing about Mystic Force is the Rangers, I felt, were more interesting than the secondary characters. But I think if you had to do that where the secondary characters became more important and more interesting, you do it here in Jungle Fury. Because again, those guys are far more interesting to know about and to learn about. And again, if we were going to do like the Spirit Ranger thing, why not make them all Rangers and have their separate team or something? I don't know how you could have done it, but I think that was a big misstep for the series, is we're supposed to be interested in these characters, or we're told to be. And I guess that's the thing, is like, it's only on for a season. So we don't have the opportunity to really voice our opinion of the show. Because if we watch for let's say the show's on for 3 or 4 years, and nobody likes Theo, well, they can generally write Theo out of the show, or have him less of a role, kill him off, whatever you want to do, and replace him with somebody more interesting. And again, going back to Star Trek, they did this a number of times where somebody wasn't working out, character just wasn't right, they killed them off, and then we had to move on to something else, or move on to a more interesting character. Voyager being the prime example. Killed off Kes because she just wasn't working out story-wise. But you get Seven of Nine, who is so much better in storytelling. Wouldn't this be great if Jungle Fury was on for a while and, hey, Casey isn't working out, then we make Master Fant the leader of the team or something? That kind of stuff would be interesting. But given the format of Power Rangers, we can't get that. I can only hope if there's ever a sequel to Jungle Fury or a prequel that we will focus on the master characters, who, again, I just found a lot more interesting. And that was one of the strikes I had against Jungle Fury, is I just did not care about the characters too much. The ones I didn't get enough screen time, did not get enough story development, and that's one of the reasons I did not particularly enjoy Jungle Fury when it first came out. Now, the second issue that I had with Jungle Fury was the fact that I saw Gekiranger prior. Now again, I don't want this to become a whole Sentai versus Power Rangers kind of thing, but I am of the mind that if you are adapting a show that's on at least a year prior, you should have the opportunity to watch the show, understand it, and find what worked for it and what did not. As my interview with Kevin Rubio pointed out, they had access to the episodes from Ghost Sager and Super Mega Force, and Kevin Rubio had those. I am going to make the assumption, and I could be wrong, but I'm going to make the assumption that the writers of Jungle Fury, strike or not, had access to the Gekiranger episodes. That means they would have been able to watch them, understand these characters, and see, yeah, that worked, or I don't like that, have a little bit of a debate and discussion with them. And when it comes to Gekiranger, the reason I say it's better is because I feel that they handled the characters with a little bit more... The characters were more interesting, let's put it that way. And I'll just give a quick example here to tell you guys what I'm talking about. And if you haven't seen Gekiranger, I suggest you do it, because it's actually, right now, Gekiranger is my favorite Sentai. Which, yes, I understand this clouds it for my perception of Jungle Fury. But this is all my opinion, and you're free to disagree with that. But coming into the series, Gekiranger being the only Sentai I had watched in its entirety at the time, it has eventually become my favorite Sentai. And considering the fact that Jungle Fury to me was just not interesting to me at the time, and I had these things I didn't like about it, I know it may sound unfair, but this is just the way I came into the series. But let's take the characters of Daishi / Jared, excuse me, and Ryo. Now, Daishi, it basically possesses Jared throughout the series. He's in the driver's seat. There's the internal struggle between him and Jared's personality, and Jared becomes good, Daishi is expelled, and so forth and so forth. That's kind of the gist of it. Now, of course, what's interesting about that story is that you have this struggle within between the good and the bad that's, physically manifests itself as two different forces. But when you look at the character of Ryo, and again, spoilers for if you haven't seen Gekiranger, Ryo witnessed his entire family be killed in front of him when he was a young child, grew up, became a martial arts master, then rebelled against his masters, formed his own army and armada of enemies, of demons and so forth and all that. And it turns out in the end that he was manipulated by a godlike being for that godlike being's amusement. That from the moment that his family was killed in front of him by the godlike being, Ryo was set on the path to become the god of destruction, as it was described. That his entire life had basically been dropped down to him being a tool for somebody else. And when he realizes that, he eventually defects, and he becomes suicidal, almost lets the Rangers kill him, and makes the heroic sacrifice to, he sacrifices his life to save the Gekirangers, and in the end, he's united with the only person who truly loves him in his sidekick of Melee, Camille's counterpart. Now, I speak with that story with a lot of reverence because I liked it. It was damn good. The one thing I loved about Gekiranger was the villains, was Ryo and Melee. They were the reason that I liked the series so much, because they were engaging, they were interesting, they had complex and interesting backstories. And even when we get to the Overlord characters, and Grisaka and Carnosaur and their Japanese equivalents, their story ties into a greater mythology and backstory with the character of Bruce E. and the 8 or 9 masters and their relationship to one another and how they rebelled against each other. All that stuff is very interesting, and I liked all the villain dynamics. Now, when we look at Jungle Fury, now I don't expect them to go note for note, but I would expect them to see what aspects of the Ryo story worked and incorporate that into the Daishi Jared story. But they didn't. They went their own way with it. They came up with a new story, which I don't fault them for in the slightest. But what I'm trying to say about this is, one is clearly better than the other, and one came before. To me, it sounds like Gekiranger and Sentai should come first, Power Rangers should come next, and improve upon or make better what you already had. And in the case of Daishi Jared, I don't think that they improved upon the original character. Now, am I saying that they should have made it exactly like the Japanese footage? No. Again, what I'm saying is they should have made Jared and Daishi's story better than what Ryo had. Now, if they attempted to do that and we got this as a result, the what we actually got in Jungle Fury, well, some things just don't work out, and I get that. But I don't get the sense that they were trying to make it better. They were just trying to do something different. And I think that's where we run into the problem, is that you don't do it different just to do it different. You do it different because you want to make it better than what it is. And I've said this before. Plato said that no story is, ever original. It's always based on something else. There are no original stories anymore. And I have professors that kind of agree with that. There are only 20 plots, and it's just your variation on them, on how you can make a good story. I was actually reading a book by Ann Allison, who basically says that the plot to an episode of O-Ranger was the plot to the Matrix movies in a simplistic form. That, of course, O-Ranger did it first and the Matrix did it later, but the Matrix did it better and thus became a worldwide phenomenon, whereas O-Ranger is, in a way, in the obscure depths of Sentai lore, but that's also another topic to discuss. But the point is that you had a product that came before, and what came later became better, because it was able to see the flaws of what came before and became better. And it was different, but better in a good way. And I just don't like the idea that the writers have the opportunity to make something better, and they just do something different for different sake. Now, how much of this actually goes into the writer's strike, I don't know. That's something that I think has to be researched, and maybe an interview with one of the writers would be helpful in that. But going back to my original point, Gekiranger was better. It is better than Jungle Fury. And I came in with the idea of hoping it would be better than Gekiranger. Because, again, I think you need to improve upon that in areas that need improving. And they did some things. Like, okay, the Jungle Masters in Gekiranger, they were in those animal costumes the entire season. I didn't particularly like that, and I thought their characters were a little on the less interesting side. But I will credit Jungle Fury that they gave them human forms. They gave the animal forms later at the end. And unlike Linkara, I'm not as bothered by that and so forth. But I felt that they improved in that way. That they had the character of Master Fant's Japanese counterpart, whose name is escaping me at the moment. He was basically just like, I wouldn't even call it pedophile, just like girl crazy, basically. But they made him dignified and more interesting in Jungle Fury. Same thing with Swoop and Sharky Chan and all those guys. I do think that they were improvements. And that's what I'm talking about. Make improvements on the characters than what we had before. Even Geki Violet I didn't find as interesting, but I found RJ to be better than him. And so that's what I'm getting at, is like they made some strives to make the characters better, and other times they just like, it's just not going to go ahead and work out. And frankly, I'm going to get into that another time regarding the Sentai and looking all that stuff up, because that is a much bigger conversation and is at the root of, I think, a lot of Power Ranger discussions. But sticking on Jungle Fury, I think I'm just going to go ahead and end today and go and give last call. I'm going to go ahead and end with this observation. Jungle Fury was a decent series. I wouldn't put it at my top best. I wouldn't put it at my worst. I'd put it somewhere in the middle. Now, do I like Operation Overdrive better? Yes. For right now, I would say that, because I did enjoy a lot of aspects of Operation Overdrive better than Jungle Fury, because, again, Jungle Fury is just bland in my opinion. So I agree with the things Linkara is saying. I think he has a little bit more reverence for the series, and I do think it probably needs to be talked about a little bit more, because it is one of those series that just kind of fades into the background. Everybody talks about how awesome In Space was, and how bad Turbo was, and all that kind of stuff, and the classic of Mighty Morphin, and of course about how people perceive Operation Overdrive as being horrible, and how they love SPD and Dino Thunder. But again, Jungle Fury, nobody ever really talks about that, so that's what I have to go ahead and say about it. Again, we will cover a little bit more in-depth about the Sentai stuff in a future video. I promise we'll get to that, because that's a topic that's very much worthy of a deeper discussion. So I want to thank you guys for joining me here on this lovely holiday. I don't know where you guys are, but there's a couple of feet of snow outside my window. But I just hope you guys enjoy yourself. I hope you guys enjoy this podcast, and I really hope you guys enjoyed Linkara's video. Go watch it, subscribe, whatever and stuff, because he's got a lot of great points on Power Rangers, and I will say this too. He does acknowledge at the end of his Jungle Fury video that RPM is very divisive, so I'm really, really curious to see what he thinks of RPM when we get to March. So here's counting down the days to March. Anyway, thank you guys for listening. Have a good holiday, and the tavern is now closed.